Hi, everybody. I wanted to thank you for taking the survey around the question, does the world need saving? And it was really interesting to me when I looked at your responses. The vast majority, about 3/4 of you, said yes, but there were a couple of you that had a completely different perspective that I found a little bit interesting. So in the beginning of the course, I had you read just a little tiny bit of the intro to the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. And the premise, teacher seeks pupil, must have an earnest desire to save the world, apply in person. And yes, the narrator is a little bit annoying, but I think we find that a lot of us probably come to this work, sustainability, through the lens of industrial design or whatever it is that you're from, thinking I have to do my part, and this isn't just for me or my children or my grandchildren or whatever, it's for the greater whole. And I think that's something a lot of us have in common. So the underlying premise that we often come across, especially for those in the realm of sustainability and environmentalism, is the world needs saving. Why? Because we've screwed it up. Extinction, overfishing, etc., etc., etc. Then we go, let's take these steps. Boy, are we ever clever. Let's get everyone on board, and maybe that'll lead to awesome. Our planet is beautiful again, and things are just better, more equitable, everybody's more healthy, and etc. But when we talk about saving the world, what do we really mean? Who are we saving it for? How long do we have to do that? Why do we have to do it? And by we, I mean humanity, not just the few of us that are in this classroom. What'll happen if we don't? And so I think the underlying whisper, and when we get into Ishmael a little bit more, they'll talk more about this idea of mother culture. These things that have been kind of planted in our heads since the time we were children that we don't even recognize are underlying mythologies or stories, that we sort of live and breathe them. So the underlying whisper, or the whisper of mother culture, is this. Really, what we are talking about when we're thinking about here is the need to save human civilization, especially our way of life. When I'm talking about the majority of the cultures in the world who have power, we want to be able to save our ability to keep living the way we want to, in comfort, with lots of choices, without making a whole lot of sacrifices. What we mean is we want to save it for us, and we better do it quickly because we're kind of frail. Most of us who have power aren't planning for or thinking about multi-generational changes. As some of you mentioned, whether it's politicians or businessmen or whatever, businesswomen as well, a lot of people are just thinking about turning a profit. Better make that money now. We still have some resources before things change so much. Keep going, but just if we are into the sustainability and we are looking at the whole ecosystem, we're just going to do it smarter. So speaking of smarter, we have to do it because we're the smartest, aren't we? We're the smartest species, so it's in our hands, isn't it? And so that's kind of one of the problems, and one of the things we get at in biomimicry is this idea that, we're an incredible species, and yet we don't hold all of the knowledge ourselves. And that's why in biomimicry, we look to nature as a mentor and say, how are you doing this? And again, how can we apply that to the challenges that we have? So the world, per se, doesn't actually need saving. If we want to survive, we do have to figure out how to exist on this planet better, which might mean changing our ways. And as we've seen from the pandemic, especially in this country, people don't like to change. Making sacrifices is hard. And if people feel like their rights are being infringed, well, obviously you're going to have a lot of protest for that. And I think all of us, since we were children, probably feel like that to some degree. If someone tells you can't do something, a lot of us want to rebel. I think it's a little bit in our natural tendencies. Whether or not it's the right choice, I just think that's an instinct a lot of us have. Now, perhaps Einstein, he's often quoted as saying, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And so that's something we want to think about. If we've created these problems and we're saying, well, now we need to fix them, and we're going about business just thinking about how do we do less bad, well, are we really going to have that much of an impact? So the world is going to be okay one way or another. Now, the extinction alone that we're facing is a tragedy too large for words. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this isn't horrifying and disgusting in our lifetimes, and my child's lifetime, and if you have children, your children's lifetimes, it's going to be potentially a very different world. And that idea is scary and it's depressing. But as a planet, when we think about time scale, again, getting back to this idea of multi-generations, we don't tend to think like that. But the planet, the geologic timeline is vast, and we have faced extinctions before, and guess what? That's why we're here. So I guess the question is, does evolution stop with us? And where do we get this ego from that tells us we're the ones that have to fix it? I mean, we do have some responsibility, but long scale, what could this look like? So it's true, we have responsibility and we need to do something now. And it's also true, as the mathematician in Jurassic Park would say, life finds a way. So what if life has always found a way, even when we look in places like Yellowstone, in these extremophiles, and even trying to find life on other planets, in the most extreme conditions, we can find some of these things. So what if we looked outside of our current human cleverness and looked into the systems and the organisms that are resilient? Sorry, my pup is whining in the background. What if we thought outside our literal boxed office spaces and actually looked outside, literally? Because nature is incredibly resilient. And so if we're learning how we can do that, that's a really good place to start.